There are men born to be adored, and then there are men born to disappear. The last great men will not be loved. They will be misunderstood, misquoted, disfigured by those too soft to bear their contours and too clever to admit they could never become them. They will die alone, or worse, surrounded by people who do not understand them. And when the dust settles, the very crowds who once recoiled at their fire will build temples out of their ashes, because cowards have always been fond of dead heroes. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's begin here, in the mountains. Not just any mountains. These are the Alps, the death-silent ridges where Friedrich Nietzsche walked as a phantom in daylight. Here he fled the sickness of men, and sought something that might still be called a soul, or at least something that could still speak to one. He did not come here to think. He came here to burn away the rot, to outpace the poison of comfort, to exile himself from everything that had made him weak, and then to kill the part of him that wanted to be accepted by the world he had renounced. Because to become what he had to become, he first had to die. Nietzsche was not a man of peace. He was a man of war, a war so volcanic it left his body crippled, his mind overheated, and his name cursed. Not because he was wrong, but because he pointed to something too hideous to be forgiven. He told modern man this: you do not love, you possess, you do not believe, you consume, you are not moral, you are tamed. And then he said the one thing you were never supposed to say: God is dead. Not because Nietzsche hated God, but because man had killed him, not with bombs or words, but with forgetfulness. Nietzsche didn't write in search of fame. He wrote in mourning. He wrote like a man clawing through the rubble of a collapsed cathedral, trying to find the last remaining ember. He wrote because the collapse had already happened, because he saw what would come after the death of meaning, a man unanchored. And he was right. Men scrolling, numb mechanical faces, cold apartments lit by phone screens, echoes of nihilism. The voice sharpens, poetic but biting. Today we see it all around us. The soft apocalypse, the decline dressed in dopamine. We mock gods but worship algorithms. We drown our emptiness in women we do not love, money we do not need, and pleasures we do not even enjoy. We are men of abundance, with the character of slaves, and Nietzsche saw this coming. He called it the last man, a creature that seeks nothing higher than comfort, security, and equality, a creature that laughs at greatness, because greatness demands suffering. The last man is not evil. He is worse. He is boring, predictable, non-threatening, emotionally available but existentially empty, always nice, never dangerous, always understanding, never awake, and worst of all, he is loved by women, by society, by his therapists and followers and brands, because he plays the role, he conforms, he is agreeable, he never threatens the status quo with a higher order, he makes no demands on anyone, and so no one ever has to rise. Nietzsche did not want to be the last man. He wanted to become something else. He called it the Übermensch, not a tyrant, not a demagogue, but a man who creates his own values in the absence of gods, a man who suffers meaningfully because he chooses his burden, a man who disciplines himself not for applause but for becoming. But what Nietzsche never fully said, what he perhaps couldn't even admit to himself, is this: the Übermensch will not be loved. He cannot be, because to walk the path of becoming is to abandon the comfort of recognition. It is to walk into the forest where no paths exist, to be seen as arrogant for having standards, to be called cold for mastering your emotions, to be called toxic for drawing lines that preserve your fire, to be alone, not because you are unworthy of love, but because most love is not worthy of you. This is where the existential schism begins, between the man becoming and the woman mirroring. Because the man who rises above the herd does something terrifying. He stops orbiting the feminine. He stops curving his edges to remain attractive. He stops needing to be desired. And most women, though they admire this at first, will not walk with him all the way into the wild, because the wild does not flatter them. The wild demands sacrifice. And most love today is a negotiation, not a devotion. They do not want the man becoming. They want the man available to soothe them, available to please them, available to submit, emotionally, spiritually, or symbolically. But the man on a mission cannot be available, not in the way they want. He is not cruel, he is consecrated, and for this, he will often be unloved. Nietzsche died alone, insane, murmuring to horses, his books unread, his soul unheld. He never married, he never found love, he never knew rest. But here is the unbearable truth: he won, because though the world never gave him comfort, he never betrayed the fire. He gave the world his warning, he gave the world his agony, he gave the world the mirror, and the world flinched. But now, Now that same world echoes with the whispers of his prophecy. You hear it in the hollow slogans of broken men. You hear it in the sharp quiet of nights spent alone, trying to remember what strength feels like. You hear it every time you pretend everything is fine, but it isn't. Nietzsche was not made to be loved. He was made to be true, but not in returns. But this time, golden sunrise over the peaks. The man stands tall, back to the viewer, alone but unbowed. The narrator's voice is quiet now, but piercing. So I ask you this, are you still waiting to be loved? Are you still softening yourself for approval? Still apologizing for your clarity? Still hiding your mission behind your need to be understood? Then you are not ready, because the last great men will not be loved. They will be feared, misunderstood, condemned. But if they hold their fire, they will become the gods that men forgot how to believe in. They will be the mountain, not the echo.
Every man at some point stands before the mirror and wonders whose eyes are watching him from within. He studies his reflection, not for vanity, but for signs of something he fears he's losing, purpose. And yet there's a softer gaze that interrupts his search, the gaze of the woman, not just a woman, the muse, the temptress, the sacred other. She doesn't ask him who he is, she asks him if he'll stay, and in that moment, the war begins. There's a terrible dilemma that haunts every serious man, the desire to be seen versus the duty to remain hidden. Because the very traits that make a man worthy of worship, his discipline, his distance, his drive, are the same traits that make him incomprehensible to most women. She says she wants strength, but strength is cold. She says she wants direction, but direction leaves her behind. She says she wants a king, but then resents the throne that does not seat her beside him. So what does he do? He softens, at first just a little. He bends his path to meet hers. He explains himself so she won't feel lost. He makes his discipline relatable. He delays his mission to reassure her, and for a while, it works. She glows, she loves him, because he makes her feel safe, because he makes her feel seen. But soon her eyes begin to search him differently. She doesn't say it out loud, but she can feel it. He has abandoned the fire. This is the paradox. What makes a woman fall in love with a man is often what makes her leave him, or worse, what makes her stay but stop respecting him. Because when a man becomes available, when he becomes emotionally eager, when his eyes are no longer fixed on something greater than her, he dies, not literally, but existentially. His edges dull, his silence disappears, his hunger becomes devotion, not to his destiny, but to her approval, and she begins to test him, not out of cruelty, but to find out if the man she loved is still in there. This isn't just romance, it is ritual, ancient, subconscious, and unavoidable, because she is not asking for power, she is asking for polarity. She is asking the question every woman asks every man, whether through sex, silence, or sabotage: are you for real? Are you who you claim to be? Will you hold your frame when I test you? Will you keep walking when I weep? Because if you bend, she knows you were never the mountain, only a man pretending to be one. A man on a mission cannot orbit the feminine, not because he despises her, but because he knows, if he orbits her, she will lose the gravity that pulled her to him in the first place. The most powerful men in history understood this. Odysseus tied himself to the mast, so the sirens would not seduce him. Siddhartha left his palace, his pleasures, even his wife and son, to find truth beneath a tree. Marcus Aurelius wrote, ruled, fought, and buried his children, never once pausing to ask if the world approved. They were not cruel, they were consecrated, they belonged to their mission, and because of that, they belonged to history. But let's speak plainly. Modern men have been trained to fear this solitude, to fear being too masculine, to fear being emotionally distant, to fear being labeled toxic for daring to walk alone. So instead of becoming sovereigns, they become servants. Servants to comfort, servants to validation, servants to the softness of woman, not her depth. They give her everything, except the man she fell in love with. Nietzsche never married, not because he was unworthy, but because he knew the cost. The women he adored, like Lou Salome, never truly saw flame, but feared the fire. He was not a man to be domesticated, he was not a man to be held, and when he tried, briefly, it nearly destroyed him, because a man like Nietzsche wasn't meant to be loved, he was meant to burn. Now listen to me, and listen with blood in your ears. If you are a man walking the path of becoming, you will be tested by soft eyes. She will not call it a test, she will say she just wants time, she will say she just wants your presence, she will say it's not fair that you're always chasing something else, and you will want to give her what she asks. But the moment you do, you will lose the kingdom you were building, not because of her, but because of you, because you forgot what the fire was for. Grant tokenes poen and boen eventual tokenes poen juice off. Disation to become something she can believe in, to hold your truth when she tests it, to remain on the path, even when it leads you through nights she cannot share. Because if you do that, only if you do that, her love may become something holy, not adoration, not comfort, not attachment, but reverence. And if she cannot meet you there, you will grieve, and then you will rise, alone, not because no one could love you, but because the mountain does not share its summit with those who fear the climb. There is no softer path to greatness, no gentle way to awaken the God inside you. If you want to be loved, be pleasant, be agreeable, be available. But if you want to become something eternal, be willing to be alone, not forever, but long enough to become unrecognizable to the man who begged for love.
There are men you meet only once, and they do not stay, not because they couldn't, but because they were never meant to. They pass through your life like ghosts, fully formed, unbending, in motion. You feel their silence in the room after they leave. You remember the weight of their gaze more than their words. You remember them because they never tried to be remembered. They just were. Men of such singular conviction, they disappear from the world of comfort and reappear only as legends. Discipline is a word thrown around like a slogan, but for the last great men, discipline is not a virtue, it is a curse, a possession, a fire that never lets them sleep. You want to know why these men were feared? Because they did not need reminders. They did not need calendars or praise or deadlines. They were haunted by their own standard. They could not stand the version of themselves that rested. You think you're disciplined because you train when you're motivated. The last great men trained because they were not, and in that refusal to collapse, they became untouchable. There is something terrifying about a man who wakes up before dawn, not for aesthetics, not for a photo, not for some digital affirmation, but because he can't bear the idea of dying ordinary. You cannot negotiate with a man like that. You cannot tempt him. You cannot shame him. You cannot outwork him, because he does not work. He serves, not a company, not a trend, not a woman. He serves the ghost of the man he has not yet become. He is haunted by his potential. You want to know what makes a man dangerous? Stillness. Stillness is the sharpest blade, not rage, not loud bravado, but stillness forged through unbroken rituals. No need for validation, no thirst for distraction, no desire to be known, just the daily sacrifice of comfort upon the altar of mastery. Men like this are forgotten by society until society needs them, and then suddenly they are remembered as saviors, even as they disappear again ghost-like into the silence from which they came. But here's the truth nobody says out loud. Discipline will cost you everything that makes you feel normal. Women will say they admire it until they realize it means being second to something invisible. Friends will applaud it until your consistency reminds them of their compromises. The world will romanticize it until it threatens their mediocrity. To be truly disciplined is to exile yourself from the warmth of the common fire, and yet, to not be disciplined is to die unlived. Broad reason the most disciplined men feel ghostly, because they do not live in the same dimension as most. They walk among you, yes, but their minds are years ahead. Their focus is elsewhere. Their solitude is chosen. They are building empires in silence, and no, they are not celebrated, because they are not designed to be loved. They are designed to endure. Let me speak clearly to the modern man. You will not be great if you cannot be invisible for a decade. You will not be great if your attention can be broken by a notification. You will not be great if you must be congratulated to stay consistent. Discipline is not doing hard things once. It is doing hard things forever, without praise, without permission, without being seen, because you are not working for this world. You are working for your own judgment. The last great men are already dead in the ways you fear death. They do not fear being misunderstood. They do not fear being unloved. They do not fear being alone, because what they're chasing is not affection, it is alignment. They would rather be hated in truth than adored in compromise. And when the world finally sees what they've built, it is too late. They are already gone, not dead, just disappeared, into the next obsession, into the next war, into the next version of themselves. It is not seductive, it is not glorious, it is sacred, and that's why modern men run from it, because discipline does not come with applause, it comes with silence, with repetition, with the unrelenting demand that you become someone no one understands, not even yourself, until the day it clicks, and you wake up a king, not because anyone crowned you, but because you buried every weaker version of yourself in a graveyard of broken days. You want to become untouchable, disappear, let them forget your name, let them whisper that you've changed, let them mourn the boy who needed attention, because when you return, you will not need to say anything. Your presence will speak louder than their memory of your absence. There is a moment in every man's journey when the wars are quiet, the blades are sheathed, and the voices that once drove him mad have finally fallen silent. And in this silence, he sees it,
Not a finish line, not a reward, not a crowd, but something stranger, something terrible, an empty throne. And suddenly he realizes, this was never about being loved. It was about becoming worthy to sit where no one dared to remain. Where are the men who built cathedrals and bled for codes? Where are the ones who chose fire over comfort, truth over applause, silence over simulation? They are not here. Their statues erode, their names are misquoted, their words are merchandised, and yet in the bones of the world, you can still feel them. The throne still waits, not for a politician, not for a prince, not for a boy with a brand. It waits for the last man, the one who did not run from his shadow, who outlasted the women who tested him, the friends who failed him, the culture that forgot him, the one who buried his need for affirmation beneath 10,000 days of ritual, the one who became a god by dying as a man. Let's speak plainly now. The greatest temptation in a man's life will not be money, nor fame, nor power. It will be love, because love, the feeling of it, is the most beautiful death. It makes you soft where you should be sharp. It makes you pause where you should press forward. It makes you want to be seen when the truth demands that you vanish. Understand this. A man without mission who finds love dies, but a man with mission who surrenders it for love becomes a ghost of himself. This is not about women. This is about the weakness they reveal in men. She is not your ruin. You are. Her power is symbolic. A mirror reflecting your discipline or your decay. She will offer you warmth, praise, softness. But you must ask, is this the warmth of home or the fever before death? Because the last great men knew, to be loved too soon is to die unborn. They kept walking because they feared no enemy more than comfort, and because they knew, to sit on the throne, you must first burn the part of you that begged to be held. To choose love, be a crown in the dirt, because greatness in its purest form is lonely, and the fire that forges kings cannot survive in a room filled with applause. It's easy to talk about legacy on podcasts, easy to say chase your purpose when you're well fed, but legacy, true legacy, is built through grief. The grief of not being understood, the grief of walking away from comfort, the grief of watching her fall in love with a softer man, while you become harder than stone. But the last great men do not resist this grief. They use it, they feed the fire with it, until every piece of softness dies screaming in the furnace of purpose. You want the throne? Then understand this. You cannot be both understood and invincible. You cannot be both adored and sovereign. You cannot be both available and ascendant, or the crowd, the silence, or the celebration, the kingdom, or the kiss. And most men will choose the kiss, because it is easier to be loved than to be great. But the last men, the final architects of meaning, they choose exile. They choose mission over comfort, solitude over attention, devotion over dopamine. They become flames in a world of flickering lights. And yes, they pay the price. They are hated, misunderstood, feared, and worst of all, they are forgotten while alive. But in the end, they rise from their own ashes and sit upon the throne no one else could bear to approach. And the world, in its desperation, kneels before the man it refused to love. He knows now, greatness was never about being celebrated. It was about carrying the fire to the end of the world, even when no one asked you to, even when everyone mocked you for it. It was about building something eternal, while they chased likes that vanish in 24 hours. It was about dying on the path, rather than living in the crowd. This is your final test, modern man. You will be tempted again. She will smile. Your friends will call you back. Comfort will whisper your name, and you will stand before two doors, one marked loved, the other marked great. You cannot walk through both. Choose carefully, because once you step through, you cannot go back. Relid, the paradox is complete. Wail, bow, bow. Relid, the paradox is complete. You cannot walk through both. Choose carefully, because once you step through, you cannot go back. Relid, the paradox is complete. Relid, the paradox is complete. Relid, the paradox prodes. Relid, the paradox is complete. 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 Relid, the paradox. He was never loved because he was great, but once he became great, He could finally love without being owned. He could finally rest without being broken. He could finally lead, because he no longer needed to follow. The throne will always be empty to the man who cannot walk alone. If this shattered your illusions, like, comment, subscribe, and join the resistance to the modern drift.